What if one burning ship is not the story, but the warning shot for something far more dangerous? What if the real threat is not the fire on the water, but what powerful nations decide to do next? Before we go deeper, do one quick thing for me. If you want more clear breakdowns that cut through the noise, tap like, subscribe, and share this video with one person who still thinks these crises stay far away from their life. Because they do not. They hit fuel prices, food prices, shipping lanes, elections, and the daily mood of the entire world. The image that grabs everyone first is always the same. A massive vessel in distress, smoke rising into the sky, panic on the deck, radar screens lighting up, governments rushing out statements, news anchors talking faster than usual, social media filling with clips, maps, and confident claims from people who do not know even half of what they are looking at. In moments like this, the explosion is dramatic, but the real story is never just the explosion. The real story is what that blast means, who benefits from the chaos, who feels forced to respond, and how one incident can unlock a chain of decisions that nobody can fully control once it begins. That is what makes a crisis in the waters around Iran so dangerous. It is not just about one ship. It is not even just about Iran and the United States. It is about pressure. Strategic pressure, political pressure, military pressure, economic pressure. And when all of that pressure builds in the same narrow space, even one strike at sea can become the spark for something much larger. To understand why, we need to slow this down and see the bigger picture the way decision makers see it, not as a viral clip, not as a dramatic headline, but as a live wire stretched across one of the most sensitive regions on Earth. The waters near the Strait of Hormuz matter because they connect the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. That sounds simple, but the consequences are enormous. A huge share of the world's oil and gas shipments moves through that narrow route. When traffic there feels secure, markets breathe easier. When traffic there looks threatened, traders react, insurers react, shipping companies react, governments react, and regular people eventually react when prices rise. That is why an attack on a major ship in that area never stays local for long. The shock moves outward. And that is where fear becomes power. If a country can create doubt in that passage, even without fully closing it, it can still rattle the world economy. It can raise costs. It can change naval deployments. It can force stronger states to choose between restraint and retaliation. That is the trap. The attack itself may be limited. The response rarely is. Now imagine the scene from Washington's point of view. A large commercial vessel is hit. Maybe it is disabled. Maybe it is burning. Maybe there are casualties. Maybe global energy markets are already tense. Maybe military commanders have been warning for weeks that more aggressive action was coming. At that point, the White House is not only asking who did this, it is also asking what message gets sent if America does too little. Because in a crisis like this, reputation matters almost as much as firepower. If U.S. leaders believe Iran or an Iran-backed force struck a major ship and got away with it, they worry that more attacks will follow. They worry allies will doubt American protection. They worry enemies elsewhere will study that hesitation. So the pressure to answer hard and answer fast becomes intense. But Tehran sees pressure too. That is the part many people miss. Iran has spent decades building a strategy around survival under pressure. Sanctions, isolation, covert action, cyber attacks, regional rivalry, military threats, economic hardship. The system is used to feeling cornered, and regimes that believe they are cornered do not always step back when threatened. Sometimes they dig in. Sometimes they escalate in small, deniable ways. Sometimes they send a message without openly claiming responsibility. Sometimes they test how much pain the other side is willing to absorb before it strikes back. This is why maritime attacks are so useful and so dangerous at the same time. They create confusion. Was the ship hit by a missile, a drone, a mine, a small boat, sabotage, or an accident? Was it a direct state action, an allied militia, or a rogue actor trying to provoke a wider war? In the first hours after an incident, facts are often incomplete. But decisions do not wait for perfect facts. Military planners work with probabilities, not certainty. Politicians work with pressure, not patience. And once revenge enters the picture, the logic changes again. Retaliation is never only about punishment. It is also theater. It is meant to prove capability. It is meant to re-establish fear. It is meant to tell domestic audiences, foreign allies, financial markets, and hostile actors that a line still exists and crossing it still has a price. So when people hear a title like this and think only about a ship being attacked and a superpower striking back, they are seeing only the surface. Underneath that surface is a much deeper contest about deterrence. Who scares whom? Who blinks first? Who can absorb pain longer? Who can create instability without triggering total war? Who can destroy enough to send a message, but not so much that the message turns into a regional inferno? That memory makes both sides more dangerous. The United States has overwhelming military power, especially in long-range strike capability, naval assets, surveillance, and alliance support. Iran knows it cannot win a straight conventional war against America, so it thinks differently. It looks for leverage points, choke points, ambiguity, proxies, missiles, drones, maritime harassment. The goal is not to defeat the United States ship for ship. The goal is to make intervention costly, unpredictable, and politically painful. Now picture how a revenge campaign could unfold after a major ship attack. The first wave would likely be fast and focused. Surveillance assets identify launch sites, radar systems, drone facilities, small boat staging areas, missile depots, command nodes, coastal batteries, or Revolutionary Guard naval positions. The strikes come at night or just before dawn. Precision matters, speed matters, surprise matters. The message is simple. If you attack critical shipping, the price will be immediate. But even a limited strike can open multiple doors. Iran could answer directly. It could launch missiles at regional bases. It could harass more shipping. It could activate allied groups in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, or Yemen. It could target energy infrastructure in Gulf states. It could pressure Israel through regional partners. It could use cyber operations. It could also choose something quieter, like waiting, watching, and responding at the moment of its own choosing, where the United States is exposed and public attention has moved on. That is what makes revenge feel satisfying in the first hour and terrifying in the 10th day. It creates the illusion of control while multiplying the number of ways control can be lost. And there's another layer to this that matters just as much: the information war. The moment a ship is attacked, 3 battles begin at once: the military battle, the economic battle, and the narrative battle. Governments rush to define what happened before all the evidence is public. One side says this was terrorism. The other says it was self-defense. One side says a compound was destroyed. The other says civilians were targeted. One side says the attack restored deterrence. The other says it exposed weakness. In a crisis, shaping belief can be as important as striking targets. That is why people watching from home need to be careful. Early footage can be real and still misleading. Official statements can include truths mixed with omissions. Viral clips can show fire without showing cause. Commentators can sound informed while quietly guessing. The fog of war is not just smoke on the water. It is the gap between what happened and what everyone wants you to think happened. Still, some realities are easier to understand than others. If a large ship is hit in one of the world's most sensitive energy corridors, insurance premiums rise. Routing decisions change. Shipping companies become cautious. Naval escorts become more likely. Markets price in danger. Even countries that want no part of the conflict are forced into its consequences. That is the invisible blast radius. It reaches far beyond the deck of the vessel itself. And ordinary people always pay in some form. Maybe through higher transportation costs. Maybe through more expensive food. Maybe through market volatility that hurts jobs and savings. Maybe through fear that spreads much faster than facts do. This is why distant conflicts never stay distant. The map lies to you. The supply chain tells the truth. Here is where the central tension becomes unavoidable. The United States wants to restore deterrence without getting trapped in another open-ended regional war. Iran wants to show it cannot be pushed around. Without inviting destruction, it cannot fully survive. Both sides want strength. Both sides fear humiliation. Both sides talk about stability while preparing for instability. That is a terrible combination, and it gets worse when domestic politics enters the room. In Washington, any president facing a dramatic strike on a major ship will be judged not only by generals and diplomats, but by voters, markets, party allies, rivals, and media cycles hungry for certainty. Looking weak carries political cost. Overreacting carries political cost too. In Tehran, leaders face their own pressures from hardliners, military factions, national pride, economic strain, and the need to project resolve. When leaders feel watched from every side, moderation becomes harder. Now ask yourself the question many governments would rather avoid out loud. What if the ship attack was meant not just to damage a vessel, but to force a reaction so large that the region enters a new phase of war? That possibility matters. Sometimes the point of a provocation is not the immediate damage. It is to create a chain reaction. Pull a stronger power into a broader confrontation, collapse diplomatic space, drive oil prices upward, radicalize public opinion, turn ambiguity into open conflict. And if that is the game, then every response becomes a test of discipline. Strike too lightly, and you invite more attacks. Strike too hard, and you may trigger the exact regional explosion your enemy hoped for. There is no clean option once the fire starts. If this breakdown is helping you see the story beneath the headline, save this video for later, subscribe for the next update, and send it to the one friend who always says, just give me the version that actually makes sense. That small click helps this channel fight the noise with clarity. Let's go deeper, because the military geography tells us why these moments are so fragile. Iran's southern coastline, nearby islands, ports, and naval facilities give it ways to threaten shipping, even without matching the U.S. Navy in raw strength. Fast attack craft, coastal missiles, drones, sea mines, surveillance networks, and dispersed launch positions can all create risk in confined waters. The United States, on the other hand, relies on superior intelligence, air power, missile defense, electronic warfare, and the ability to strike across long distances with precision. So this is not a symmetrical contest. It is a contest between disruption and dominance. Disruption does not need to win a war to matter. It only needs to create enough uncertainty that the stronger side is pulled into a costly cycle. That is why even a temporary threat to commercial traffic can achieve strategic impact. It forces expensive protection. It commands attention. It reminds the world that geography can weaken even great powers. And then there's the proxy problem. Any direct clash between Iran and the United States creates ripple effects across multiple fronts. Groups aligned with Iran in the region do not always wait for formal instructions, and even when they do, the outside world cannot always tell where coordination ends and independent action begins. That means a maritime crisis can be followed by rocket fire somewhere else, drone strikes elsewhere, cyber disruptions, or pressure on another shipping route entirely. Suddenly, the original incident is no longer the center of the story, it is just the first move. This is where escalation becomes nonlinear. People imagine war like a staircase, one step after another. Real escalation often behaves more like shattered glass. One strike breaks into many pieces. Some land at sea, some land on bases, some land in diplomacy, some land in markets, some land inside domestic politics. And once those pieces scatter, every actor in the region starts calculating not just what happened, but what might happen next. That wider audience matters because wars are not fought only against enemies. They are fought in front of observers. Washington wants allies to believe it can secure the waterways. Tehran wants rivals to believe pressure on Iran comes with regional costs. Smaller states want to survive without becoming the next battlefield. Everyone is signaling to everyone else at the same time. And this is why revenge can become addictive. The first strike feels like clarity. A base is hit. A radar site is erased. A launch cell is destroyed. Leaders give speeches. Supporters cheer. Commentators call it decisive. But deterrence is not a mood. It is a relationship. It works only if the other side accepts the lesson you think you taught. If they do not, then the next strike comes and the cycle hardens. We should also talk about miscalculation. Miscalculation is how limited crises become uncontrollable. A commander misreads radar. A drone approaches too close. A patrol boat moves aggressively. A missile lands in the wrong place. A strike meant for a military target causes civilian deaths. A proxy group acts earlier than expected. An intercepted communication is misunderstood. Each side thinks it is restoring deterrence. Each side is actually shrinking the room for error. And unlike in movies, escalation does not always announce itself clearly. There is rarely one dramatic moment when the region stops being tense and starts being at war. More often, there's a series of incidents, each explained as temporary, each called necessary, each said to be limited, until people suddenly realize the limit is gone. That is why the phrase devastating revenge carries more weight than it first appears. If the United States chooses a punishing response, it may achieve its immediate military goals. It may destroy assets, it may restore some deterrence in the short run. But if the response expands target lists, widens geography, or produces a strong counter-reaction, the revenge may solve one problem while creating 3 more. And Tehran knows this. Iran's leaders do not need parity to stay dangerous. They need endurance, ambiguity, and enough tools to keep the stronger side off balance. Their strategy has long depended on surviving blows, shaping narratives, and imposing friction. In other words, they do not need to look stronger than America. They need to make America pay enough that every future move becomes politically heavier. This is where the human reality comes back into focus. Behind every map graphic are sailors, port workers, pilots, analysts, families, and civilians living under the shadow of decisions they did not make. A burning ship is not only a symbol, it is a workplace in chaos. A missile strike on a military facility does not happen in empty space. It happens near roads, homes, hospitals, infrastructure, and neighborhoods. Strategic language can hide human cost, but it does not erase it. So, when analysts talk about options, they are really talking about trade-offs. A narrow response may be safer, but may look weak. A broad response may look strong, but may widen the war. Secret pressure may avoid public escalation, but may not reassure allies. Public force may reassure allies, but may trap leaders into defending every next move. There is no painless path through a crisis like this. And then we reach the question underneath all of it. What does victory even mean here? Is it safer shipping for 6 months? Fewer attacks from militias? A temporary drop in missile launches? A restored deterrent image? A return to talks? A humiliating blow to the other side? A stable region? Those are not the same goal, and policies built for one can sabotage the others. Let me put it plainly. If Iran attacks a massive ship and the United States responds with devastating revenge, the first headlines will focus on force. The most important question will be control. Who still has it? Who who thinks they have it, and who is about to lose it. If you're still with me, here's my second request. Do not just watch this one and move on. Join this channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment with one word only, control or chaos. Now let's talk about what happens after the cameras move on, because that is usually where the true cost appears. Shipping companies do not wait for a philosopher to define escalation. They make calculations. Can the route stay open? Do insurers still cover it at a tolerable price? Energy is the most obvious pressure point, but it is not the only one. Container traffic, industrial materials, and manufactured goods all depend on a system that rewards predictability. A ship attack in a choke point punishes predictability. Even if global markets do not panic instantly, they start adjusting. Quietly at first, then all at once if another incident follows. Diplomacy does not disappear during that period. Back channels stay alive because both sides need exits, even while both sides also need to look unbending. This is why outside observers should be skeptical of simple narratives like they want war or they do not want war. Often both are partly true. So if we strip away the dramatic language and ask what this story is really about, the answer is threshold management. How far can each side go without crossing into something it cannot control? How much economic pain can markets absorb before political leaders face new demands? That mix is why clean endings are rare. The most likely path after a dramatic ship attack is a cycle of action, messaging, repositioning, and selective retaliation. A dangerous middle zone. Great powers are not most vulnerable when they are weak. They are often most vulnerable when they feel forced to prove they are not weak. Regional powers are most dangerous when pressure is closing in. The title sounds like a single dramatic exchange, but the true story is a contest over pressure, credibility, and control in one of the few places on Earth where local violence can rattle the entire global system. Most people wait for history to announce itself loudly. But history often arrives disguised as one incident that seems dramatic, then another that seems explainable, until the pattern is impossible to ignore. A ship burns, a base is struck, markets tense, diplomats scramble, leaders posture, and somewhere in that sequence, a crisis stops being a warning and becomes a turning point. So do not just ask whether a ship was attacked. Ask what incentives the attack creates. Ask whether hitting back hard produces stability, or simply buys a few more days before the next fire. The most dangerous moment is not always the explosion itself. It is the moment after, when every side convinces itself that one more move will restore order. If this gave you a clearer view than the usual shouting match, make this final move count. Like the video, subscribe for the next breakdown, and share it with someone who wants the truth without the drama. In crises like this, everyone says they are acting to prevent a bigger war. Yet every show of strength can also become the step that leads directly toward it. That is the paradox at the heart of this story. The effort to stop chaos can create more chaos. The effort to prove control can reveal how little control anyone really has. See the fragile lines separating warning from war. Because once a region this tense starts answering fire with fire, the question is no longer whether the world noticed. The question is whether the people making the next decision still know how to stop.